A common theme for basketball fans and NBA fans in particular is that they want basketball to be played more like how it was in their younger days. And this game absolutely delivered on it. Game one for the Rockets versus Warriors. And it makes it so difficult for me, at least, to evaluate what it means for the series moving forward. Real quickly, too, another theme for people that like basketball is that they actually don't like basketball because they just like to complain about basketball. With that said, this game was an absolute brick fight, not even a rock fight, it was a brick fight. Dudes haven't shot that poorly since like the 1950s, not even like, the 2000s when defense was at a really strong period and shooting just wasn't there yet. No, this was like 1950s numbers. Dudes were shooting in like the 20s and 30s percent pretty regularly. And, that kind of makes sense. Houston is a really gritty, sort of old school constructed team, meaning they don't really have a big that stretches the floor, and they don't really get production in more modern ways, meaning Fred Van Vliet is the clear offense originator. He brings the ball up the court a lot. He sets people up a lot. He's a true point guard in so far as what any point guard nowadays is. And, they don't have just elite shooting across the board. They have some guys that can shoot it for sure, but they kind of have more of a volume approach than an efficiency approach, which is something they can do because they do offensive rebounds so well. So they get more shots up than most teams. And they also play such good defense that, it's tough to get good looks against them as well. But man, the best defense that was played was probably Houston on Houston, as Golden State, they are, definitely more modern. They are, after all, like the originators of this era's new wave of basketball. Obviously, you have the Suns in like 2006 with the pace and space sort of more introductory team, but this era is definitely the Warriors for sure. So this style of basketball is a bit new for me in seeing it with Golden State because Golden State's always had a great defense. That's, I think, a bit underrated with people is they think of the Splash Bros and then Durant, but without Draymond Green to anchor the defense, who knows how many rings they end up having. I know it's easy to make a meme of him. He's a bit of a clown, but yeah, the defense has always been very strong for Golden State, so that's not too surprising. But just seeing them struggle as much as they did on offense, especially while Curry was just absolutely dominating at some of the highest levels he's ever dominated in the playoffs, that's very odd to see. And initially, I will say, I was pretty strongly leaning Golden State, and it was a weird series because I'm pretty low on both teams in all actuality. I have a level of respect for both of them, but I don't think nearly as highly as most analysts do regarding Golden State or Houston for that matter. So many people are just locked into this idea that Golden State is the number two team in the West. I am not quite there, but this was an impressive showing for them nonetheless because it was a win in a way that isn't necessarily how they want to get it done. This was much more in tune with how Houston wants to play. And it's really funny too because the team ratings are just so similar through the regular season for both Houston and Golden State. Houston was 13th in offensive rating, Golden State was 15th. Houston was 4th in defensive rating, Golden State was 7th, and Houston was 7th in net rating, and Golden State was 10th. That's ridiculous. That seems like, a 4-5 type of matchup, not a, 2 and 7. So it really was, pretty close on paper. But why I was leaning Golden State, and I think I feel still good in thinking Golden State would win, is that Golden State just has much more consistent waves of offense, which is odd to say because, they want to generate a lot of their looks through threes, aside from when Jimmy Butler's getting his shot. But, Curry doesn't stay down for too long very often. So you do have his production, and then Butler. It's starting to look like playoff Butler has returned. And, Butler, when he's at his best, is just consistent mid range, consistent, drive to the basket, consistent drive and kick, just really fundamental stuff without too great of shooting to accompany it. But, still really good scoring efficiency and production otherwise. Great defender as well. So, with that said, I did definitely feel strongly about Golden State, but this game kind of had me waver a little bit on it. It just kind of disorientated me as a whole because, on one hand, Houston did get the exact game they wanted, with it being very messy, and they ended up having 16 more rebounds than Golden State, which is absolutely ridiculous. You hear coaches all the time say, we're not getting enough free throws. Look at the numbers. And I think that's a really stupid, line of thinking, because if you're just getting jump shots and not penetrating consistently, you're not going to get free throws inherently. But something like with rebounds, you don't hear as often as you probably should, where it's like just such a stark contrast between Team A and Team B, with Houston just completely crushing on the boards. And I don't really think that's too unfounded that it's not talked about, I guess, in this instance, because really, what do you want Golden State to do? You either get off your best lineup, which is Green as the center, and you match Houston's size for the most part with getting Looney in there or post, and then you can match size that way, but you're not playing as well as you could talent wise, or you do sacrifice, some height and get increased skill out there. So it's kind of hard to, just say, hey guys, get more rebounds. I know you're like 6 inches shorter across the board, but get more rebounds. What are you doing? It's very odd. So it's a dig against Houston that they didn't win this game, even when the game was tailor made for them. But it's also a bit worrying for Golden State in my eyes, because it shows that the game can favor how Houston wants to play over how Golden State wants to play. And, the thing with Golden State is, I think, though they do want to have a more sophisticated, sort of beautiful offense, they can play in a bunch of ways. As I mentioned before, with Green anchoring their defense for so long now, being sort of the anti Curry, even though they're both shooters for their positions pretty historically. They, you know, Curry anchors the offense, of course, and Green anchors the defense. So they can play in a variety of ways. But I do think if this just becomes a total, I guess a nicer term instead of brick fight is rock fight, if it becomes that type of series, I think Houston really has a chance. So it's weird to say that, the team loses at home and loses home court advantage as a result, and you feel a little more confident in them, especially when the game is played to their liking. But it's hard to really make too much of this game because Şengün, awesome game for him. 26 points, 66% true shooting, 9 boards. He really helped anchor the I'm saying anchor a lot in this video, but I think it's justified. He really helped, ensure that the Rockets did have that rebounding discrepancy over Golden State. I love the absolute wrestling matches between Şengün and Green. That is just so fun to see. It's a real throwback, even if Green is like, a Dennis Rodman type of player, not, your conventional center. I love seeing them fight for positioning like that. It's awesome. But, after that, Jalen Green, atrocious. One of the worst performances in the playoffs I've seen. 7 points on 22% true shooting. Not, a productive defender. I don't think he's as bad as some people would have you believe on that end of the floor, but still not good. At least he had 8 rebounds. He was again involved in just this massive out rebounding from Houston. I would, if Green is not going to be able to get, productive offense for them, I would like to see some more Jabari Smith, because Jabari Smith was a really good saving grace for this team alongside Steven Adams, who had about 1 million rebounds per minute. Jabari Smith had 11 points on 116% true shooting. That is correct. 116. It's 1.16. He just couldn't miss. And, he was also really getting after the boards. He just adds to the size even more. So it becomes sort of comical actually when both Jabari Smith and Adams and Şengün are out there at the same time, because it's massive, massive size out there. I will say too, for Houston, Fred VanVleet, not going to be that bad, I wouldn't imagine, moving forward. Just 10 points on 26% true shooting. Great assist to turnover ratio, 7 assists to 2 turnovers, which does speak to the playmaker that he is. But you need some sort of offensive threat from your point guard as well, especially when you're dealing with Golden State, who, the biggest weakness for them defensively is Curry. So it's nice to be able to attack that a little bit. As far as Golden State goes, I think this is about, what you're expecting and hoping for, more so hoping for than what you can expect, because Curry, great player, of course, but 31 points on 78% true shooting, that's a bit much. So that's, a ton. I think Butler, you can maybe pencil in for this type of game for the most part, maybe just sliding down the stats a little bit, but 25 points on 58% true shooting, 7 boards. Curry also had 6 boards, so lots of rebounds going around, probably just due to the, shots being not through the net a lot of the times. But then Butler also great, 6 assists to 1 turnover. That is one thing he is so good at, is not turning the ball over and still, you know, generating good looks for his teammates. And then 5 steals for Butler. I like that he had a tangible number for his defense, because I was really impressed with his defense and have been since his time in Golden State. I think for the most part, he's on the cusp of being elite, not necessarily elite as a defender. Like, I don't think him at his best is what Kawhi is at his best. That's kind of an unfair comparison, because Kawhi at his best is, in the argument or in the discussion for best defender of all time. But with Butler, I don't think he's quite at that, super high end level, but he's just below it. And, he really has ushered in a lot of defensive presence to this Golden State team. So I like seeing the 5 steals to, really show off what he's doing. Yeah, the numbers, they look great for Golden State, but I don't know how to call this series. I think, there's nothing strong enough to make me go off of my Golden State inclination. But even in seeing them win, I still have a little bit more doubt than I had initially, which maybe is just a sign that I was a little bit too, behind Golden State and not respecting Houston enough. which is again weird to say because Houston couldn't make a shot for their life in this game. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. This is definitely a great series to watch moving forward, and I wouldn't be surprised in saying that if Golden State doesn't win this in like 5, but I do definitely think it has the makings of a feisty, competitive series moving forward, which is always good to see, especially early in the playoffs like this. It's a real testament to how strong the playoffs are this year. Those are my thoughts on Golden State and Houston. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content.